The alarm's going off, man. Stop hitting snooze. I need you. If you're looking to feel like warm and fuzzy inside, like I'm your guy. So they're in my top 20 EHL teams for sure. There's emotion, there's hatred. This is not like a very friendly series. It's like SpongeBob when he's got like the napkin and like the potato chip. Like that's how I feel. Listen, Colson, I didn't have fun. Everything in my body hurts right now. The team that has the lead in the second period is just not going to win that game. There's no need for air quotes. He's tardy all the time. It's the American thing to do. I was alive, just not very. No, don't get pucks deep. Hang on to the puck. Pass the puck. Shoot the puck. Are we live? Are we live? We're having a good time. JKP, baby. JKP. Welcome into week 2 of the E-Show Off-Season Coaches Interview Podcast Series. Up for today is head coach of Hockey Club Rhode Island, James Mello, coming off their most successful season to date. So, Coach Mello, thank you for taking the time to be here with us.
Yeah, Jake, pleasure. It's good to connect again.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we have Combine as well, so I'm going to see more of you, which is always good. But it was a successful season for HCRI. You're most productive on the ice in terms of, the base stats, points, wins, pretty much most on ice numbers. And behind the scenes, I have to imagine that everything feels like it's been continuing to trend in the right direction as well, Coach.
Yeah, obviously every year we go into this, we always talk about how much we like the group that we've got coming in. And I think, last year's crew that moved on, bringing in 20 new guys, I think it was a little bit of a, question mark in some ways, but, we knew that we liked all the kids that were coming in. And, in terms of taking a step forward, I think it's our first, 20-win season. I think we might have led the league this year in overtime shootout losses with 8. So, you think about what could have been, but, in a lot of ways, there were guys that were kind of cutting their teeth a little bit and learning the ways of junior hockey and having their first step into it. But, every year just seems to get a little bit better. So we were extremely proud of the group this past year. We're a lot of 06s that played meaningful roles, that stepped up and stepped into the situation and contributed more to the culture too. So, we're really excited about, the steps that we progressively take. And, we're going to say the same thing here going into year 4. We're excited about the group that we've got coming in, and, we hope to take that next step.
Yeah, and you mentioned that it was obviously a new, heavy new group. I mean, you had such a big group of returners last year, so naturally that happened. So, how do you think the adjustment process was for both the players and for you as a coach, having to shift from a group of guys that knew the HCRI way, and then today, this year, trying to have to teach them it?
Yeah, I think the group that we had move on, there were so many characters in that squad there. Macchione, we've known the Macchiones forever. Perry Gaudreau, I've known Perry since he was a young guy, and same with guys like Jake Costa. And it was good for those guys to move on to what came next and get the chance to play NCAA college. This was kind of that new group of kids that we didn't have a whole lot of prior experience with, but leadership qualities in guys like Cooper Hall and Austin Haldane and Jarrett Rainey Gibson, as a young kid as an 06, we were just really excited to kind of again take another step farther. I think those kids had an idea of coming in because we kind of laid out to them how we do things and what we expected. I think they kind of picked up the ball and ran with it a little bit and certainly progressed the program. So, culturally, I think we're in a better place today than we were. I think they build off of the guys that came before, but starting from scratch is not an easy task. And, these guys kind of, again, picked up the ball and dragged the chains a little bit.
Absolutely. We're going to get into some of the specific players in a little bit, but first things first, the HCRI power play has always been good in all 3 years so far, always over 20%. But this year, unlike the previous 2, it was more forward heavy in terms of the points. The past 2 prior seasons, you had a number of defensemen with over 20 points. So did that require any adjustment from your end as coaching that power play?
I think we have a structure of how we want to do things, and there are certain reads that have to be made based on what kind of the defensive, setup looks like. But we talk a lot about dictating play, so they're going to kind of get what we give them, and on the power play, you got an extra attacker and, we look for certain advantages, but, make no mistake, the defenseman we had, Noah Webster, Zach Gold, that ran the power play for 2 years. We love Webby and Goldie, and they're doing great in college now. But, just the way things worked out, let's not forget last year, Perry Gaudreau was on that power play as a forward on the flank. And, thank God he had a big boy shot. But, I think it's been a little bit more balanced toward the forwards just because I think there was some more natural scoring ability on the forwards this year. I think Michael Bianco
Yeah.
And led the league maybe in power play goals. Like he was electric on that side. He had just a heavy, quick release that always seemed to find the back of the net. And Austin Haldane before he got hurt was kind of the pair on the other side of that flank, and he can kind of score at will. So I don't think it was by design. It's just kind of the necessity for what we need on that unit, and who kind of does it the best. So whether it's a forward or defenseman, if you're productive and getting us over our 20% mark, it has a big impact on games. So it's a stat we take a lot of pride in, and we've been fortunate enough to operate it out. I think it was top five this year, pretty much most of the year. So it definitely helps.
Yeah, top five every year so far. So hopefully that can keep going into year four. But once again, as far as building this team goes, you guys did it your way. You didn't carry a ton of players. Nobody gets traded. Nobody gets really moved. So how do you think that resonates with players when they know development is truly the priority in the HCRI organization?
I think I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to play in junior hockey when it was very much so development based. I played in the old Eastern Junior League, and there were 15 kids on that team that had NCAA offers by the end of the year. But we got the chance to kind of move with the group through that whole process. And Toby O'Brien, our general manager, is the one that started the Eastern Junior League back in the 90s. So, between his starting the league experience and my experience through it, we had a certain way that we kind of wanted to design this program. So we kind of said we were going to cap it at 25. We were going to invest in the kids that come through. I think for the players that are going through the process, it alleviates some of those stressors that might otherwise follow you through junior hockey. Is my job safe tomorrow, this week, next week? A lot of times these kids have a very finite window to get this job done. And being somebody that the difference between me making it and not was somebody giving me the opportunity to develop. So I think for the players, there's a certain level of respect because of how we want to do things and operate. So they show up every day in a pretty good mood, ready to work because they know that we've invested in them for the year, and this is a long-term process instead of more of a needs based on a week to week. We're looking long term with a lot of these guys where maybe they're just missing a thing or two to their game, and we've committed to them to want to spend that time to attack some of that stuff and get better. So I think it definitely sets itself to be a different situation maybe going through than a lot of places nowadays.
Yeah, I think a better one in my opinion for sure. So we appreciate that the way you guys do things for sure. But on the on ice side, it was great for you guys too. I mean, the exclamation point was the first playoff series win in HCRI history, getting revenge against an organization after a couple of seasons of having your season end because of them. So how impressed were you with what your team did in that series, coming back in both game three itself and the series as a whole?
Yeah, we've had a lot of close battles with them this year. We have over the last couple of years, and they obviously got the better of us the last 2 years in playoffs. So we were looking for our opportunity to kind of break through that first round and get to the divisional finals. And to do it in the fashion we did this year, we were down, came back, tied the game. I think it was Brendan Feely led the charge from the blue line to the far end and made a nice little backdoor dish for the game winner to our young man from South Korea, Hwani Kang. And then to go into the final game and have the chance to win it in the same fashion. I think it showed a lot of resilience. There's a lot of times when you get down in a game and early in a series where you're down by one and then down in game two and then you fight back and win. And I think I knew once we won that second game and came back and carried the momentum, I didn't really doubt that we weren't going to get the job done on day three. So the boys showed up and they scored when they needed to, and we've got some great goaltending like we have throughout the majority of the year, and it's usually a recipe for good things. So it was an exciting kind of benchmark for this organization to have its first playoff series win, and I'm glad that this group of guys was the one to do it.
Absolutely. And someone whose fingerprints were all over that series win was Austin Haldane. And he might not have even played in a different universe, but he came back from that injury and ahead of schedule, and he was one of your best players. So can you take us a little bit through his process and what he was doing to get back in playing order for, that end of season run?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know who Austin is, as a kid, he's always got a smile on his face. Like he's one of those people that just like loves the game of hockey. He loves his teammates. He loves the program. That injury for us was a tough one. I think it happened like right before Thanksgiving break in November, and it was one of the more kind of gruesome injuries that I've had to deal with as a coach on the ice. and went with him right to the hospital after, and he went in for surgery a couple days later, and dislocated his ankle, broke a bone in his foot. By all account, we weren't going to get him back, but as soon as he did it, he said, I'm going to come back and I'm going to finish the season. And we kind of just nodded our head a little bit and said, yeah, okay, Austin, we'll be excited for that. And sure enough, he's home and I'm checking in with him, and he's going through his PT work and ahead of schedule, and doing the things that the doctors required, and but pushing himself to what he knows could be his limit. And his goal is to come back and finish the year. So I think he was able to get back healthy, a few months ahead of time, got clearance from his doctors. They went in and did extra scans and everything healed up properly. And he ended up being again a contributor down the stretch. He scored some big goals for us in the playoffs. I think he scored in his first game back from his injury. Most kids would be avoiding traffic and working their way back into a hockey game, and for him, he didn't skip a beat. So, I tip my hat to what he did, but it speaks volumes to who he is, an individual and as a as a leader, as a young man. So, I mean, he's a kid we're excited about, and we'll have a lot of opportunities at the next level. But just to see him get back and have a chance to finish, that's all he wanted to do this year.
He scored in every single game of that first round, which is pretty remarkable. And he's a guy who I have to imagine will be on that main all-star team with us next year. So I'll get to know Austin pretty well on that trip. So what do you think the ceiling for him is with this organization in year two for Austin Haldane?
Obviously, it's up to him what he wants to do with it. But I think he's got all the talent, ability in the world. He plays the game within the game. He understands body language and how to control his emotions at times when he gets a little bit off his game, but he's not afraid to be physical. I think the production part of it is a big part of his game, but he's a kid that just loves the puck on his stick. He loves shooting. He loves getting down into the dirty areas of the ice. So I would assume for him, he's going to have a really unbelievable breakout year, because I'm hoping that he can do it healthily and knock on wood, be able to get through the whole season without injury, and really have a chance to show people who he is, because he's an exceptional young man and player that I think everybody needs in their locker room. He's a culture guy, he's a team first guy, but more importantly, he's competitive and he likes to win hockey games. So
I'll make the prediction now that he's going to score a goal against a college hockey team next season. I think I'm pretty confident in that.
I wouldn't doubt it. He's going to have 15 attempts, so he's going to try like hell, I'm sure.
I love it. And you did mention that throughout the season, you got strong goaltending. Ryan Rhodes cemented himself as perhaps, one of the best, if not the best goaltender in the league. So it earned himself the league's biggest commitment of the season to the number one ranked team in the country at the time in Curry College. So how rewarding was that for you as his coach to see Ryan Rhodes' hard work pay off?
We're very fortunate. He ended up playing here this year. I know Ryan probably had a lot of offers, but in conversations with him and how we operate, how we do things, and what we saw as like a plan for him, he trusted us with his future. So, he had the chance to come in and, in terms of what you want in goaltender, he's kind of like an even keel guy. He's always got a smile on his face. He's never too high, never too low. He had times this year where he had to stand up tall, and we played against the Express up there a few times, and he's seeing 40 plus shots, and he's giving up 2 goals in an overtime loss. So that's a tough task for any goaltender, but he never faltered, never complained. I don't think he had a game under 90% save percentage until a relief effort that was like playoffs. Like, it was pretty far down the stretch for him. So the even keel just led to a certain consistency for him that allowed him game in and game out to pretty much be himself. So when a guy does that and operates at a high level night in, night out, it's pretty easy to then approach a college coach about that. It's not like he had an outlier game where he was like this. He operates like that pretty much every day. He'd always kind of surprise us when he would be able to just turn on and give that type of performance. But the day that Curry came to watch him play, I think it was up at Walpole, and he had, I think, 45 shots. We lost 2-1 in overtime, so he gave up 1 goal on 44 shots throughout the course of the game. It was kind of one of those you don't want to look away, right? Where he just makes the game look easy. And, for those reasons, he's a really good candidate to go to a really good school and have some success at the college level. So I commend him tremendously, because he just stuck to the process. I'm sure mid-season, I think he had a couple offers he could have left and tried to chase something, and he stayed true to what he wanted to do. And as a result, he found a really good home. So we're excited for Ryan. He's a great kid. His family's awesome, and he used to do some training with me at my facility a couple days a week. So I see Ryan quite a bit. So he's a good kid to be around.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I remember when we were at Thayer for one of those games with against the Express. Some of the Express P guys were there, and they were holding up their phone to Ryan when he skated by, asking him questions, and he would signal with his blocker and glove what the answer for. So he was doing that while also stopping 40 plus shots in a game. Is that just Ryan Rhodes to you?
Yeah, it's good to hear because like sometimes goalies are kind of the ones that people try to avoid and stay away from because you don't want to break their kind of train of thought or whatever it is. But if you got a mindset like that where you're always in the game regardless of what's going on around you, you kind of lends to not having those ups and downs as much, right? Where if like one piece of your routine is off or somebody rattles your cage type deal, things can go south for a goalie in a hurry. But he was pretty unflappable this year between the pipes. So I think that sounds. I'm gonna have to ask him about that. Actually, might have just ratted him out, but
It was great. The content of the questions can't be all released, but they were.
yeah,
I was pretty impressed. I was like, wow, this might be the best goalie in the league here, and he's like joking around mid game. I was pretty impressed.
he's got a high ceiling. That's for sure.
He's awesome. And also, so in goal, you had two age outs in Clayton and Ryan, and then you had an '06 in Eddie Leary who had some good moments for you last year. He's going to be a returner, and he was a young guy in this league. So, what are your thoughts on the steps that he could take in year two? And having Clayton and Ryan ahead of him this year, how much do you think that benefited him?
Yeah, Eddie, I'm really excited about the potential future for Eddie Leary. I've known him since he was like Pee-wees. I used to go down and run Falmouth camps, goalie camps, and he was this little guy with just, big helmet and a little bit awkward, and then suddenly shot up and he became a big kid. He's got really good size. He has to continue to work on, being a little more engaged and athletic with his hands, which he started to do toward the end of the season. And I was so impressed. We played him against Cape Cod in the last showcase that we were at. And, I think he gave up like 2 on 36. We ended up having another OT loss in that game. But Zanaboni down on Cape Cod was even like, is that Eddie Leary? Wow, like what a game by him. So I think he surprised us. He was consistent. He's very calm, cool, collected. I see him having a real solid potential because he tracks the puck well. He's just got to continue to work on the things that go from you being a boy to a young man and playing at a high level against older kids. So he's going to be taking those steps this summer, and we're excited to get him back again with the long history that we've got and what he showed this past year in pockets when he got the chance to play, and excited for him to take a little more meaningful role for next season.
And one guy that will not be returning because he won our Pipeline Player of the Year award was Peyton Myers, P to E and into college in just 3 years total. So, or 2 years really in terms of P to E. So, what do you think was the key to his transition from P to E in having just that 1 year window to do it?
Peyton is another one of those kids I met. He was again probably 13 years old out in Pennsylvania. I was helping a friend of mine, Matt Bertani, run some camps down there with Toby when we do he does his overspeed, his off season. And from a young age, he was very much a professional. Like he's a all business kid when he shows up at the rink. I think he made a decision when he graduated from high school. I want to be a college hockey player, and then he did everything within his ability and his power to achieve that. So, when he took the step which he needed into the EHLP, he wasn't looking at what other people were doing or, what people said he needed to do. He said, this is a good step for me. And he ended up, I want to say he was like top two in the league in the EHLP in scoring and, played a little bit of a leadership role there in Walpole. And, our hopes always were that he was going to come finish out his junior career with us. And, we were fortunate to be able to have that happen. But, talk about a kid that shows up ready for business. It's the only perfect report card that I think I've ever seen. Like I've seen some report cards with like an A minus. Like there was not anything other than an A for 4 years of high school for
Surprised
him.
me at all.
And we're talking like AP classes, everything else. Like, yeah, I think he just has one way of going about doing things. So like when he got here, he wanted to be a student of the game. He, showed up to our team meetings with his notebook and, he journals at night at his host family's house. And I think he has a very good mental process of how he goes about things. And, at times maybe he was in his own head a little bit where, you overthink some things. And when he peeled back and just started playing hockey, I think good things fell into line for him. So he's headed off to Lebanon Valley, which he wanted to be closer to home. And, I know Coach Parsons there is excited to get him. He's a hard to knock off the puck type player. He's got a lot of facets of his game that he's continuing to improve on, but he was very deserving of this, the Pipeline Player of the Year award, because I think he's another kid that came into it and focused on what he needed and focused on his personal development, and he got what he wanted at the end of the day. Where a lot of people maybe say, you have to go another route. He stuck to the process and had a plan and executed his plan. And as a result, I think he got what a lot of kids, continue to try to search to find.
Yeah, no, he is one of the best. He's a total class act, probably one of the best human beings that I've met working in this sport for sure. And
Yep.
speaking of great human beings, another returner, you're going to have a big returning group next year. You gave me a list of guys, but one of them is your '06 captain from this past season, Cooper Hall. So for the second time, you had a captain that was not even close to their age out year, as you did in the first year with Ian Milan. So how do you evaluate the way that Cooper took on that role?
Yeah, I was going to say that first year Ian came in, he was the youngest kid on the team. But the same task that Ian had, Cooper took that on full force this year. So, the things I liked about Cooper, I sat down with him and his family at a coffee shop when we were, first recruiting him, and, looked him dead in the eye about how he wanted to do things. And he was very matter of fact that he wanted to be a part of that. He wanted to be the chance to lead a room. And, as a young guy, I think he had to find his way a little bit of, how to talk to the '04s and '06 and be a leader. And when he was announced the captain of this team, I think he got the largest ovation we've had of anybody that's been announced as a leader. So the guys are well respected, or I'm sorry, he's well respected by his peers. And I think that just comes from his day-to-day operations. Like he shows up every day, he works as hard as he can on a night in, night out basis. He throws his body on the line. He played through a lot of injury this year that most guys probably didn't know about. And he never really changed the way they do about things. So, he was a dog when he was out there. And I think a lot of times that effort and what you give and what you do can garnish a lot of respect. So despite the fact that he was a younger guy, he's got a little bit of this militaristic mindset, where I think one day he'd love to serve our country in that capacity if he could. And, I think he really tries to live his life that way. He takes care of what goes into his body. He puts in the time off the ice, but he's just extremely well-rounded individual and very mature for a young age. So, he's a kid that he hits all the buttons for me, and I know he does for a lot of the guys at the college level. And he's going to be somebody that, again, he'll find a good home. Even more so for his off-ice abilities than anything, right? I mean, he's got character traits that you can't teach, like you don't find in kids his age. So, he's a real good hockey player with, I think, even greater upside as a human, a person, and as a leader. And I think for him, he wants to take this thing to the next level too, and he wants to be a guy that really helps cement our program as an organization in the league. And we're happy with the strides that we made, but we want to win a championship. I think at the end of the day, we've got a really good support staff here, and Toby's a phenomenal general manager. Like you obviously know about Greg, our equipment guy, who's here with us every day. Toby's son Ian, who does our social media and does a great job. Our strength and conditioning programs over at Northeast Sports Training, and athletic trainer Kelly that comes in once in a while and checks on the guys on weekdays. I think as a whole group, we want to put in our very best to try to get the best out of the kids. And I think we're doing a decent job at it. We obviously want to get better every year, and that's the step we're trying to take for this upcoming season. So
Yeah, I would agree for sure. And I remember the interview I did with Cooper at the mini showcase in Walpole, and that was one of the best of the entire year. I was like, whoa, I didn't realize that an '06 could talk like that. That was
oh
pretty,
yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
And
He's wise beyond his years, that's for sure.
definitely. And one final note is that with your group, the tightness is always on full display. I don't know if there's a group in this league that enjoys being around each other more than the HCRI crew. So in the junior hockey world, where guys are leaving teams left and right, coaches are trading players, and everything's always shifting. Nobody leaves Hockey Club Rhode Island. Why is that?
It's a good question. I think by design, you're going to have a little tighter knit group just because it's the same guys that are going to be together all season long. I've seen some rosters that, out there in the stratosphere of junior hockey where there's 50 plus kids on a roster over the course of the year. It detracts a little bit from your ability to bond with the guys around you. So I think we tried to create more of a family environment here. We do a lot of team building stuff and little things before practice, prior to help the guys kind of get together. We got a great living situation. We had 16 kids living at the apartments this year, and in 4 different units. And I think they were able to commingle and enjoy the experience together. And more so than anything, you're growing up together over a 9-month window. So some of the conversations our guys have with each other by the end of the season are different than what's going on in some other locker rooms, because everybody's kind of been through it. You can recall things through the journey and through the process that we've been on over the course of the season, which in our opinion, we want to make those things matter when the time comes come down playoffs. And if you really care about the guys around you, I think you're able to get a little bit more out of yourself and out of the guys around you. So why nobody leaves, I think they enjoy it. I think they like being treated well. We took, what was it, like 16 coach bus trips this year. Pretty much anything outside of Walpole and Worcester we're busing and commuting to. So they get that good treatment, that they get to feel the part, right? You get on the bus together. They don't have to drive themselves to games all that often. And we try to provide a good experience. So that's something, Toby O'Brien, my GM, and myself have seen eye to eye on. And the icing on the cake is you get Greg here, who like sharpens your skates. He makes sure that all your tape is full in the locker room. He does your laundry. I mean, treated about as well as you can be treated. So I think the guys understand, appreciate that. And, if all the boxes are being checked, there's really no reason to leave. Just, get to work.
Yeah, I definitely would not want to leave if I was playing junior hockey for Hockey Club Rhode Island. So congratulations on a great year, Coach. Hopefully a lot more to come with the big returning group. And thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, appreciate your time, Jake. Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for listening to The E! Show, presented by the Hockey Podcast Network. Learn more about us at easternhockeyleague.org and follow us on all of your favorite social media platforms. Also, be sure to subscribe and get notified when our next podcast episode is released.